Okay, let's go to recruiting. Luke Fickell, different approach than Paul Chryst, through a couple recruiting cycles. How would you term those differences at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. Different approach is a great way to lead off with that. This recruiting staff. So I've talked about this a lot. Wisconsin's never going to recruit. I shouldn't say never, but they're going to really struggle recruiting the polished five-star type athletes, the Ohio State types, the Georgia types, right? So how do you close that gap? What this staff has done is they target length, they target upside, they target athleticism, right? So they've really attacked taller cornerbacks that maybe need a little bit of refinement. They put back-to-back classes at the cornerback spot together really, really well. And they found athletes on the offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, receiver, running back. They just trying to find upside, and they've revamped with Luke Fickell coming in from Cincinnati. They've really revamped the strength and conditioning program. He's brought his guys with him. He's brought his recruiting guys with him. So they believe if they get the raw tools in, they can develop those guys into the type of players that are going to beat and compete with that upper tier of the Big Ten. So it's really been a change in philosophy of we're going to find guys who maybe need a little bit more refinement. We're going to find guys from places that aren't recruited maybe quite as heavily. We're going to land those guys, and then we believe in-house we can develop them.
So with May and June being what it is in recruiting circles, with all the camps concluding here in the next couple weeks, and of course official visits, how is the progress going for 2025?
Really well. The Badgers are just kind of finishing off a heater, coming off 3 weekends of official visits. And the class is getting pretty full. There's only a couple spots left. They're looking for another defensive lineman probably to fill it in. But aside from that, they've really, really continued to get to that next level in recruiting. Wisconsin at this point, I think they were 12th in the 247 rankings, 5th or 6th in rivals. Now, they have more commits, so that they are going to drop a little bit, but that's indicative of the type of progress they've made. This official visit season has been really, really good. I'll highlight a couple key players. Mason Posa is a 4-star linebacker out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, a guy who had official visits coming up to Oregon, had an official visit coming up to Texas A&M. They were able to get him on campus, and he shut those other visits down. Didn't even get to Oregon or Texas A&M. It's that type of recruiting that they get people on campus now. And Wisconsin traditionally maybe wasn't landing those guys. Now Wisconsin, if they get them on campus, they have a swinging chance to land just about anybody in the country. Another great example of that is Logan Powell, is an offensive lineman coming out of Phoenix. Big time prospect, had a visit coming up to Bama, a few other places. Again, he got on campus. They shut that recruitment down, landed a 4-star guard coming out of Arizona. Just really, really successful with the official visit season. And the Badgers are pretty close to wrapping up that 2025 class.
Do you notice, Ryan, any type of different type of player, especially on the perimeter, because of so much made out of Luke Fickell and Phil Longo and what they want to do with speed and space?
That's a great question. So perimeter, we'll do cornerback and receiver quick. The big difference at cornerback is they're targeting 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2" guys. The last couple classes, a guy that I would highlight in last year's cycle, 2024, was Xavier Lucas coming out of Florida. He's a guy that Miami wanted. He's a 6'1" cornerback with 4.4 speed. They're getting that type of athlete at corner. At receiver, they've really tried to find. They're in on a Muiz Tankara. He's the 6'4" receiver. He's going to be deciding in a couple weeks. And then they were able to land a couple really fast, shifty receivers in the last 2 classes, Kyan Barry-Johnson and Cameron Miller, both kind of explosive playmakers in space that are going to play in that Phil Longo system. Phil Longo famously last year had a quote that said, outside of like my wife and family, slot receivers are my favorite thing on planet Earth, right? And he's been able to find those in the 24 and 25 class to kind of fill out that air raid offense that they're trying to implement.
So Chimere Dike moves on to Florida, so he's gone as a receiver. Will Pauling had a bit of a breakout season last year. So while you just brought it up, I think we'll go there in regards to weapons for this Wisconsin football team. Are they at the position where they are able to put those kind of guys out onto the field, and specifically at slot receiver, since you bring it up?
I think they're probably still a year away. Right. I think like Rome, the great saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. Phil Longo, Luke Fickell aren't going to transition an offense and a program that's been pro style for the last 25 years into an air raid in 1 year. But progress was made. Will Pauling, you mentioned, one of the best slot receivers in the Big Ten and the country last year, 74 receptions. He's back. He's a really good player. The receiver a lot of Badger fans are excited about is Tresh Kekahuna. He was a late grab in the 24 class, or 23 class, I apologize. And, he's a guy that has some explosiveness, probably more of a slot guy, but a little bigger than Will Pauling. But on the boundary, I think you're probably still a year away. Bryson Green is a guy that arrived last year out of Oklahoma State. They like what's there, but he had kind of an inconsistent season. CJ Williams was a 5-star receiver coming out of USC. They pulled him in the portal last year. But again, a bit of an inconsistent year. So they're probably a year or two away. But Badger and Bournemouth is a good dude. But they're getting there. And I think it's all progress, right? If you get a little better from last year to this year and a little better from this year to next year, you eventually build that machine that you're trying to get in Madison.
We got Ryan Harrington on the line from Locked On Badgers. What's the best way to lock in with what you've got going on there, Ryan?
No, I really appreciate that. Obviously, we do the YouTube show. That's a daily show. We have a Discord as well. If anyone's interested, we talk. We say no politics, no Gophers. Anything else on the Discord kind of goes. So it's a great way to communicate with the community or really just join the show, see what's coming up, new guests, that kind of stuff, ask questions. So I would say either YouTube or jump over on the Discord. It's free. No politics, no Gophers. Anything else is good to go.
I think we've got you beat by one here, Ryan, because we're good with the Gophers talk. No politics, but we do allow the Gophers. Sorry about that. There is Minnesota football talk. If I recall, that Wisconsin permanent schedule is announced by the Big Ten starting in 2024 with those permanent opponents. It's Iowa and it's Minnesota, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Does that make sense? Makes sense to me.
Yeah, there's really nothing else on there that would need to be added. You Wisconsin, listen, there's no scenario where you don't not play Minnesota every year. The Axe is enormous. You see it kind of, maybe you can see it on my bookshelf back there or not. I only display it when we win. If the Badgers lose, the Axe goes away until the next year when we play them. So that's the obvious one. And then Wisconsin, Iowa, two programs that have so much similar shared history, both kind of traditionally pro style guys until just recently. Similar profiles of success as well, just kind of in that tier right below the Ohio States, Penn States, Michigans. You have to keep those. Aside from that, there's no one else in the Big Ten where it feels like Wisconsin has to play them every year. For a long time, Wisconsin, the Big Ten, it felt like they were trying to align Nebraska and Wisconsin as rivals. And it just really hasn't happened. It's felt forced. It feels forced from both fan bases. So, yeah, that the way they did it makes a ton of sense for me.
Ryan, of course, we can't talk about any team without talking about the quarterback position, but especially with the transition that we've got at Wisconsin and with the style of offense that they want to play. Now, if Tyler Van Dyke shows up and he's the Tyler Van Dyke of about 8 to 9 games in 2021, when he was regularly lighting up defenses in the ACC for 350 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns every week, including the eventual champion Pitt Panthers, NC State, who had a really good defense. He was just hot, and they had it working there. The last 2 seasons, it's been hit or miss, throwing a few too many to the other team, looking a bit confused, certainly as the arm talent. And go back to the Texas A&M game, folks, and you will see probably the last time when Tyler Van Dyke looked like Tyler Van Dyke and was throwing like NFL type throws over defenders' shoulders, missing helmets by that much because he had that much confidence in where he was going to place the football. But he's a guy that if they get him right, could be pretty incredible. So the 2-part question is the TVD of evaluation, but also there's a guy by the name of Braden Locke that we can't forget, and his shot at the job.
Yeah, listen, that's the $1 million question. Last year, the Badgers brought in Tanner Mordecai, the SMU transfer, and for a lot of reasons, not all of which were on Tanner Mordecai, it didn't work out, right? The offensive line had some issues. There were some receiver drops. So now you're bringing in another transfer quarterback. Here's the thing with Tyler Van Dyke. I think quarterbacks at times, I don't know if you would agree with this or not, I think they get too much credit and too much blame for what happens on the field at times. You look at a Miami ecosystem where every year he was switching offensive coordinators. It's just tough as a quarterback when you're constantly being put into new systems. Now, you can easily say, well, he's doing that again, right? Like now he's changing again. But I don't think he was the last couple of years in a system that really suited him. You go back to that 2021 version, that's more what he's going to be asked to run this year. And he gives Wisconsin an arm talent that they frankly haven't had since Russell Wilson. Like that type of ability to vertically push the ball. That's what Tyler Van Dyke does. He has an NFL arm. He has NFL size. Decision making, consistency. Those are question marks, and that's why he's still in college, right? Because if he didn't have those, he'd be in the NFL with those physical tools. But he gives them an upside at that position that they haven't had in a while, and I think that's what's exciting for Badger fans. Because if he can hit 80 to 90% of that upside, now you have a veteran offensive line. You have more weapons on the outside that are year two in the system. You have Will Pauling. You have Chez Mellusi, Tyree Walker, transfer running back from Oklahoma. Pretty quickly, all the pieces coalesce around that quarterback if Tyler Van Dyke can be a version of that 2021 self. For Braden Locke, he's a guy, came in last year, had to replace Tanner Mordecai, and he had to play Ohio State. He had to play, the first game he played was Iowa, right? Like, he got thrown into the fire, and I actually thought he acquitted himself pretty well. Really, really smart player, understands what Phil Longo wants. The Badgers have his younger brother, Landon Locke, coming in the 2025 class. So it's kind of a quarterback pipeline there. I definitely wouldn't write him off, but Tyler Van Dyke's going to be the guy until we see what version of Tyler Van Dyke we get. If we get the 21 version, he's going to be the guy the entire year. If we get the inconsistent version, 3, 4, 5 games in, you might see that pivot to Braden Locke.
It's pretty incredible what Braylon Allen was able to accomplish as one of the youngest players in college football. He was basically mashing defenses for 150 yards a week, and he was still 17 years old. So he may not even be 20 years old at this point. I don't know, playing NFL defenses, but he's off and running to the NFL. You mentioned Chez Mellusi, extremely talented back coming in from Clemson. He just needs to be able to stay healthy and stay on the field. And Tyree Walker, despite other players at that position being more highly touted, was probably the most dependable back that they've had here in the last year or two at Oklahoma. So it looks like they've got a nice combination there.
Yeah, you said it. Chez Mellusi's a super easy guy to root for, right? He's had basically just career-ending injury after career-ending injury, but injuries that aren't related, right? He's not consistently hurting his ankle. He's not consistently pulling a hamstring, a groin, those type of things that make you think it's going to keep happening. It's flukish stuff. It's a broken collarbone. It's getting rolled up and having a leg injury. When healthy, he's really good. He's a B-tier type starting running back. So he's not in that, anything of the great Wisconsin running backs. He's not in that tier, but he's a really good starting running back. And then you have Tyree Walker coming over from Oklahoma, talking to an Oklahoma guy. He said, you guys are going to love him. 7 touchdowns, bowling ball, really runs hard, physical guy. And then behind him, there's 2 freshmen to keep an eye on. There's Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree, both 4-star type running backs, came in last year's class. Alabama tried to poach those guys. Really talented young players. I expect probably Dylan Jones to start working into that reps this year and give the Badgers some version of kind of a 3-headed monster there.
Our guy Sonny from the Illini cast and Locked On Illini gives us great recommendations here at the Voice of College Football on a regular basis. So the last and most recent being, you see him right here, Ryan Herrings from Locked On Badgers joining us. So we appreciate Ryan stepping by and appreciate Sonny as well. So this Wisconsin defense under Jim Leonhard was exceptional year after year after year after year, especially in the front 7, posting top 5 defenses in the country on a fairly regular basis. I was always amazed trying to translate the star rankings to the product on the field. They were decent on defense, but nowhere close that standard. With Mike Tressel running the show, is there hope that they can get back to that level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the aspects that they ran into last year, and this just isn't Tressel, this is Fickell, Coach Longo on offense, Tressel on defense. They were really trying to walk this line of using pieces recruited to a different system. The system Jim Leonhard and that staff wanted to run, definitely different than what Tressel ran at Michigan State, Cincinnati. So they were trying to kind of fit square pegs a little bit into round holes. But there were also some talent issues on the front 7. They hadn't adequately replaced some of those linebackers and some of those defensive linemen. So, atypically, the Badgers got ran on a little bit last year. Atypically, they didn't have that disruptive outside linebacker that for the last 10 years, it feels like the TJ Watts and the Van Ginkels and the Zach Bonds. They just didn't have that guy. So there was a combination of new scheme, fitting old players into new scheme that didn't fully work, and a combination of lack of talent in the front 7. It should be better this year. They've made a concerted effort. In fact, if you point to one thing in the portal, they went after speed and athleticism at the linebacker spot. They brought in Leon Lowry, a starter from Syracuse, who's going to add some edge burst. John Pius, a starter down in Division II, who's really, really good off the edge. They went and got Tackett Curtis from USC, one of the bigger portal wins. And then they went and got Jaheim Thomas, Arkansas's leading tackler in the SEC, right? So they really said, we need to revamp this linebacker group. And I think they did. I think they knocked that out of the park. You're going to see more speed, more athleticism, more depth, more versatility, kind of in that middle level of the defense for the Badgers, which is going to generate more of that pressure, more of that disruption. I think the problem and the question you still have is that defensive line. I think they're a year or two away from fully rebuilding that. It's a spot where I think they have guys that are good, they're solid. I don't think they have a disruptive presence there. And as you know, if the defensive line gets pushed around a little bit, then all that speed and athleticism at linebacker, it kind of gets negated a little bit. So that's the big question going into this year for the defense. Linebacker is going to be much, much better. They're deeper, faster, more experienced, more skilled. The secondary is pretty rock solid. Hunter Wohler is one of the best safeties in the country. Ricardo Holman at corner had 7 picks last year. They're both back. But it's the defensive line that's really going to dictate just how good this unit can be. And I think they're probably still a year or two away there.